Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everybody. Today, my guest is former FBI Special Agent and also Supervisor Special Agent Scott Duffey. And together with Scott today, we'll talk about the murder of Brian Thompson, the CEO of a health insurance company in Midtown Manhattan, and the case against his killer, who is a person by the name of Luigi Mangione, who's well known in the news and is very well known to the Italian public as well. Thanks for your time, Scott. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. The morning on the East Coast for the USA. So for everyone else in different time zones, hello.
Yeah, good morning or good afternoon or even good evening, depending on who's watching it and from where. Scott, before we get into the topic of this conversation, would you like to tell me and my viewers something about you, like who you are, what's your background, and what you did with the FBI?
Yeah, I'll start with the current. I'm currently the co-director for the Criminal Justice Institute, now under the umbrella of the Center for Law, Justice, and Society, under Wilmington University in throughout Delaware. We have campuses Wilmington and Dover and then throughout parts of New Jersey. And there we do public safety training and a host of other items that we're looking as we build um, programs, not only for law enforcement, public safety, first responders, but a whole host of individuals that are looking to get into Wilmington University and see what we're all about. I was an FBI agent for 22 years. I finished up my whole career in the state of Delaware and retired as a supervisory special agent. And then before that, I was a police officer.
Well, let's get to our discussion. So we're talking about the murder of Brian Thompson, who got shot in Midtown Manhattan in December last year by this guy by the name of Luigi Mangione. So let's start from the very beginning. What happens in the mind of a person who decides to go in the street, wait for the CEO of a health insurance company and shoot the guy? What happens? What's the motive? What crosses the mind of a person who does that?
Yeah, great. Very complex, philosophical, probably. What is in the mind? Back in the early 70s, the FBI started a unit called the Behavioral Science Unit. That's where the infamous profilers who have worked for that unit, who continue to work for that unit, but it is now expanded into to so many different areas. But ultimately, wanting to know why people do things and what are the patterns that law enforcement can glean from interviews and research and to, if at all possible, prevent, right? So what is going on in Luigi's mind? This is such a brazen, I mean, even though it was early in the morning for New York City, that's not early. That is daytime. And so it could have been altogether different with the amount of people that are traveling through mass transit on foot and by car. So the mindset is always the intriguing aspect of why people do things. And I think there's a host of reasons, but I've always said throughout my career and of course in my post career, trying to understand individuals that ultimately the motive relies or lies within the mind and the heart of the individual. If that person's not going to be interviewed, that person has died as a result of law enforcement action or someone taking their own life, then that motive, even though we can theorize, is often remains somewhat of a mystery. So we know a little bit, right? At least what's been put out into the public spotlight through affidavits and the like, through I guess some of his alleged works, that he had a bone to pick. He had a gripe. He had an issue that meant or the healthcare industry is corrupt. And then why not start with um, removing the CEOs? It did it from early on. It did not look like that Brian Thompson, the victim in this case, um, was the sole target. that I believe there would have been others if he had not been caught.
Well, one interesting thing we see in the crime scene in this case is that the cartridge cases had the three words spelled written on them that were delay, deny, and depose. But what I don't get here is was Mangione expecting for these cases to be found on the crime scene, or is it something he did for himself? Like, was he trying to communicate to investigators? Because somehow that happened. Okay, we have, for instance, the case of the DC sniper in 2002, when these two guys were leaving messages for the police to be found. Is that one of these cases, or did they create this cartridge cases for himself? Because let's also keep in mind that he shot the guy with a gun, with a ghost gun. So something that he 3D printed himself for himself. What do you think?
Yeah, I would imagine that if anyone's going to take the time to write on the shell casings of the bullets, that you are looking to have those remain behind. Otherwise, why put anything on? He could have easily picked up those shell casings and fled the scene, trying to take whatever physical evidence he could take with him. But they were left there for a message. There's no doubt in my mind that if you're going to take the time to write words on something, you want them to stay behind and get that cat and mouse game. This was a very tragic, brutal case of homicide. But at the same time, um, there was a clear message to be left behind, was it on purpose that the words were slightly different than what I believe is the motto of some insurance companies, that hey, the way we make money is the way that we try to prevent at all possible of paying out claims, right? I mean, we know insurance companies throughout the world that it is very difficult for us as consumers, whether it be health or any other type of insurance companies, that sometimes we do not have the best of communication, and maybe we think more for what we're putting into it, and definitely what we're getting out of it. So no doubt in my mind, Leonardo, that a message was being set for the world, that this individual knew, hey, law enforcement's not going to keep this to themselves. It's not going to keep it close to the vest. If he were still on the loose and we were still trying to figure out, maybe those words, that piece of evidence wouldn't have so quickly been revealed, but it surely would have come out through different court processes as this goes public.
Well, can you tell us something about the investigation and how the police was able to track him down? Because we have a few things going on here. For instance, his mother reported him missing a few weeks before the murder, and then this guy also left his backpack behind in Midtown Manhattan. And we also have the eyewitnesses describing him. And he fled the scene, if I remember well, by riding a bike, so nothing very sophisticated. Do you think he thought, he was expecting he could get away with this murder? What happened, and how did the police track him down? This is what I would like to ask you.
Yeah, I don't think he was expecting or planning to get away with it. I don't. I think we would have seen less, even though there were few clues. There were enough clues for law enforcement in a very big city to be able to piece together the things that they needed to. For example, the classic pictures without his mask at a local hostel, um, the backpack. Those things aren't by accident, for sure. There would have been better planning in his escape, um, if and nothing left behind as far as he could control. But the fact that law enforcement obtained his DNA, um, and being able to piece together eyewitness accounts along with surveillance, along with clues, for example, the name provided at the hostel is the same name that I believe he used to identify himself to law enforcement in Pennsylvania. And you know, law enforcement might have kept that name close to the vest with regards to what name did he use, knowing they probably learned early on this is a bogus name, it's a fake name, but it's a key piece of evidence. And the fact that he used that to identify himself to law enforcement several states away, um, all clues that whether intentionally or not, um, to continue to stay cloaked from his identity and stay on the run, and then perhaps go to another planning of a homicide. Um, but ultimately, especially today's day and age, it is very, very difficult for something so brazen to be done. Um, Unfortunately, today, especially in the United States, so many homicides, so many violent crimes go unsolved, not for any lack of investigation done by police, but ultimately coming down not a whole lot of clues, whether it be surveillance video, digital footprints, and eyewitness accounts. But this guy made himself known and spent a considerable amount of time planning up to, but not after.
Yeah, in this case, what the key thing in the investigation was eyewitnesses, right? Because then someone described him after his picture was shown on TV. This is what happened, if I remember well. So I think that one thing that I don't understand is how reliable are eyewitnesses in this case? And this is a question I also asked twice last week while making a similar interview about the DC shootings at the Jewish History Museum, because I keep hearing from wannabe detectives that actually eyewitnesses are hardly reliable because if you are under stress because you've seen something shocking, your recollections might be wrong, and also that different eyewitnesses can like influence each other, so they have to be kept separated in different rooms. Is that correct? How does it work?
Yeah, so true. We've evolved like everything else, evolving and growing in our technological advances and whatnot. Eyewitness accounts early in my career were probably still very focused, very central to an investigation. We call them federal lineups, right? If you observed a crime, whether you're a victim or a witness, and then I did my investigation to come up with who I believe could have committed that crime. I would then get their photo. I would put it in a lineup. I would then present that photo lineup to you, putting that individual in a random number. Typically, it's five or more. I typically did eight, and so you're putting like individuals, right? Same background, same background of the backdrop of the picture. Um, of course, if somebody has no facial hair, make sure all my pictures are somewhat similar, and then go to somebody and say, "Can you pick out? Um, does anybody look familiar to you? Describe." And so I have a protocol that leads up to that, and then I'm watching the witness, the victim, look intently at the photos, and um, I have had good successes, but I've also have not, and I think there's no doubt in my mind, especially as more research is done, that eyewitness accounts are not great. They do not stand well on their face value, but they are a clue. And it doesn't mean that an individual who suffered that traumatic event as a victim or witness, that they cannot assist law enforcement. But you are so right that the brain is doing so much to protect the rest of the body from whatever that traumatic event can trigger. And so it is amazing that they're not lying. They are absolutely petrified and their memory is not assisting them. Now, there are ways to help alleviate some of those mental blocks, but eyewitness accounts are good as long as they are supported by additional factual physical evidence.
Oh, once he was found in this restaurant, he didn't even try to hide. So we don't have a situation like Andrew Cunanan, who was hiding in a boathouse and had a gun to protect himself. We don't have anything like that in this case. Do you think that he was actually willing to be caught, to become a sort of crime superstar or something like that, or to get credit for what he did?
Yeah, I mean, it's been my experience that, and I'll always go back to the planning, the post planning. So you can jump on a train, which we believe he did, and then made his way probably through other readily public transportation or hired transportation, and made his way to a town, right? The city of I believe it was Altoona. I believe so. Um, and so you're talking about this has now become a national event. It's been televised, well played out, photos distributed, I'm sure, to law enforcement in their databases outside of what we're seeing in the news. And I think he felt I can hide in plain sight, and nobody is going to be paying any mind to me. And so that says a lot about an individual that's aware. I probably would like to continue to do what I'm doing because I have a message, but there are things that we as human beings are limited into doing. It is it is an extreme act of violence. Um, and that having committed that act, it's one thing to think about it, it's one thing to then fantasize about it, it's then another thing to plan it. And then of course finally to execute it. That changes an individual. And so keeping the gun, keeping the backpack, keeping key things, providing that same ID that he did to the hostel, those are all key things which which ultimately led to his capture. And I think um, he was readily waiting for somebody to come and do exactly what happened in that McDonald's.
So after he was captured, the police also found out that he had written. They used the word manifesto, but actually it's just like half a page. So it's very. I read it this morning because I wanted to be ready for this interview, and I must admit that it sounds very stupid. It's just delirious mind rambling on. And but in this document, he expresses his hate at health insurances. So we have a guy in a hoodie and a manifesto. This screams Ted Kaczynski, at least to me, and this is the case that I thought of when I saw the picture of Luigi Mangione on TV. But other than this, what does writing down this manifesto tell us about him as a person?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's something that he has in his possession. I'm sure law enforcement has already done their due diligence in order to process that as a piece of evidence. It's one thing to be in his possession. That's great. It's another thing to link him as actually writing it. Um, and so, you can do that through multiple of ways and whatnot. So I imagine they have done that. And there may be additional pieces of information through the search warrants I will take that they have done on whatever other sorts of digital mediums that he may have had in his possession or that may have been located. Like you said, his mother reported him missing, so it will be interesting to see what exactly has been seized by police, laptops, phones, etc., that he might have left behind, but had been thinking, writing, researching this type of thing to lead up to the fantasy and the execution stage. So if for all intent purposes this is his writing, yes, it is a glimmer into his mindset, his heart, um, somewhat of a confession that could be used as long as it can be entered into a courtroom. And this is important for law enforcement to try to know the why. Um, but it is not. It is important, but it is not the end all be all. You might be off on the motive. It may be his, like before he was caught, lots of law enforcement pundits, including myself, in trying to analyze. We're trying to figure out um, what was this, and is this someone who is intent to rid the world of uh, health insurance CEOs and their executives to try to change. This is in a sense, you're trying to change the culture of something, and so thereby it is in many regards an act of terror because you're trying to change the whole dynamic um, of something. And so all this plays into, and I think it does assist law enforcement in the end, trying to figure out his ultimate motive.
Well, let's get to the craziest part of it. So, after the murder of Brian Thompson and once Luigi Mangione was identified, we saw on social media, but also in the streets and graffitis on the wall, a lot of appreciation for what he did. So, people writing things such as, well, first off, repeating the words that he had written on the cartridge cases, but also writing on social media things such as Luigi Mangione is my hero and something like that. And also the hoodie that he was wearing, no, not the hoodie, the jacket that he was wearing got sold out because people wanted to buy the same jacket as Luigi Mangione. So how can people be so stupid nowadays? Because I don't recall anything of the sort for Ted Kaczynski. No one was expressing appreciation for Ted Kaczynski. And you could argue that in the 90s we had no social media, and that's totally correct. But for instance, even in the streets or anywhere else, no one has ever expressed sympathy for Ted Kaczynski. While now we're seeing this for Luigi Mangione and also for the shooter of the two guys in DC at the museum. What do you think?
There's some examples of these. How should I say it, with regards to people who try to justify, right? The end justifies the means. And so the end goal is to change the way health insurance, in this case, health insurance, is denying many. Um, and there's probably plenty of evidence to show that there are many people who suffer throughout the world, but especially in the United States, where we're supposed to have some of the best healthcare anywhere, that people who are in dire need are not receiving it, right? And people who have tried to do things in order to correct their health if they were on a terminal path, and insurance denied it because ultimately things have to be paid for, and then somebody died. So the the I don't think you would run into any individual um, who will say they don't have an issue with their insurance company, and not just health, but car insurance, any type of insurance that where you have hefty premiums, just get by. If you're in a car accident, the likelihood is your car is worth a lot more to you than the check that comes to you to pay for maybe a whole different type of car because it wasn't enough. All this plays into the human condition that life is not fair. Things are not fair, and how can we change things if we can? And so when you strike a nerve, people are like ignoring the fact that this was a brutal homicide, ignoring the fact that a father, a husband, a friend, a CEO, whatever have you, regardless of who the individual is, he's still a human being who is the face of a company that may may very well be conducting corrupt practices, putting money over life, right? I mean, those are the daily challenges of business that wants to grow, but at the same time remain ethical, moral, and humane. So you have already a huge group of individuals that could say, was this all that bad? Um, it's staggering to think that there is that much support, the amount of money that was raised, but um, but at the end of the day, especially from what I have done in my whole career in life, is you must remember the victim, and that the end cannot justify the means here. That there are other ways to garnish support, to gather support, to if it's voting something out in order to change the way things are, and in this case, business. So that's it's it. But I think history has shown, the Robin Hoods steal from the rich and give to the poor. It's like, okay, that seems like a fair deal. So you will have that support throughout history, I think. But in this regard, I think we've kind of seen it show its ugly head, which I also believe that there's just a lack of human empathy with regards to how this all played out.
Well, let's get to the case against him. Do you think, of course, it was very easy to build a case against him because it's pretty obvious that he shot was happened in plain sight. Do you think he can face that penalty? What will be the outcome of this?
Hmm. Yeah, so you're looking this from two different angles. You have the city charges, right? New York City leveraged their homicide charges, their act, I believe, an act of terror, um, and then related charges that the possession of the gun, etc. Um, and then you have the federal government coming in and then also leveraging its case again. Excuse me, through its case against Luigi. So,
Go ahead.
hmm. So in that regard, you're looking at a significant amount of time, and with the possibility, if the feds choose um, to pursue the death penalty. So everything is on the table, whether it's used as leverage or whatever have you. Ultimately, that is the deciding factor of the judge, the jury, should there be a conviction. But no, in my experience, no case is a slam dunk.
Of course.
You said the word obvious. There are things that are obvious as a result of law enforcement's investigation. Um, but it comes down to putting it all before a jury, where what is inside the mind of a juror who may be thinking, I don't buy what the government is saying. It's very possible. So nothing is a slam dunk.
Well, Scott, many thanks for your time and for your very, very precious explanations. I think that we broke down the case in the details. So I think that whoever is watching this video right now have now much better understanding than about this case than before. So thanks again for explaining this case to us and for the time you gave me today.
It was a pleasure, Leonardo. Thank you for inviting me on your show.
Thanks everybody else for watching this video and see you all in my next episode. Bye bye.
Bye bye, everybody.